Hello, and thank you for joining us today to learn 5 things you need to know about cybersecurity and human risk. I am Kathleen with Design Privacy. This webinar will be led by Doug Kreitzberg, founder and CEO of Design Privacy, and will feature Janice Pechonick of Driasi, who will share a bit about their experience with the fish market and what they've learned about cybersecurity within their organization. We do have the Q&A function enabled, so feel free to type any questions in there and we'll address them at the end of the presentation. This webinar will be recorded and available on our website. Thank you so much for joining us, and I will hand it off to Doug to get started.
Okay, thank you, Kathleen, and welcome everyone. We'll be talking about human-factored cybersecurity, the impact of human risk on cybersecurity within our organizations. And I'm pleased, as Kathleen mentioned, to have Janice Pechonick with us from Driasi. Janice, welcome.
Thank you.
And Janice, I was wondering if before we begin, if you could say a little bit about Driasi, what Driasi does, and your role within Driasi.
Yes. Driasi is a third-party insurance administrative services company. The Driasi is actually an acronym for Direct Response Insurance Administrative Services. We have a number of clients that contract us to do policy management for them. My role with Driasi, I've been with the company almost 12 years. I'm a member of the IT group and do everything from help desk to desktop support to some system administration. And I've been the key person or the point of contact with Design Privacy for the last few years and working with the cybersecurity training.
Right. Well, great. Well, welcome, Janice. Happy to have you on board. I already have a few questions for you, but I'll hold off on that for a moment. By way of background, Design Privacy is a cybersecurity and data privacy risk management consulting firm. We work with organizations to address compliance needs, kind of risk assessments, building out their cybersecurity frameworks, as well as spending a lot of time on the human side of cybersecurity, and I'll explain why in a moment, including with one of our programs, which is the security awareness program we call Fish Market here. The purpose today is to really talk about cybersecurity through the lens of human risk, and when we think of cyber attacks, this is kind of the image that typically comes to mind, right? It's that hooded somebody somewhere flailing away at the computer, trying to get into our systems. Often, however, we should be looking here as to where the root cause is, because invariably it's through our actions that the bad guys are able to get in. And just taking the famous Pogo cartoon, kind of positioning it towards as a reflection of the human risk that exists within our organizations. What we'll be talking about is why cyber is human, the human elements, and what's occurred in the past with regards to that's come out of derived from human risk. Why us? Why are we kind of that focal point? What we can do about it, and then the one thing that we want to remember when we end our presentation here and leave today. Okay, so let's just walk through a couple of examples. This one is an oldie but a goodie. This is Target, $300 million in losses, plus I guess the firing or the resignation of a CEO and some other people in the organization. The source for this really came from a third-party vendor, actually an air conditioning HVAC vendor, who had a vulnerability in their system clicked on a link and gave access to ultimately target and for them to attack it. This is a French film company. This was involved in a social engineering scam where the French film company thought that they were providing money to the Home Office to support an acquisition. So they sent $21 million to a wire, an account. Unfortunately, it wasn't the Home Office that they sent it to. Broadcom, this is actually a disinformation attack. Broadcom was in the midst of doing an acquisition, and there was a report that was published, purportedly coming from the U.S. government, regarding doubts about the success of the acquisition, which caused a downtick in the stock price. And over that period of time, Broadcom lost millions of dollars as part of that. Twitter, there's a lot going on in Twitter these days, but a year or so ago, there was a hack, and it was actually, I believe, a teenager in Florida who was able to, through some disinformation, social engineering, gain access to credentialed accounts and began posing as some major personalities through Twitter. Often the case, though, we don't hear about, but we see is this happens. Especially in the small and medium-sized business arena, there's stats out there that say up to 60% of businesses who suffer a cyber attack go out of business there. And even if the numbers aren't that large, given that the average attack for a small business can cost upwards of $1 million in out-of-pocket costs, let alone any potential lawsuits that come out of it, that can definitely put a strain on a company's margins and ability to survive here. So this is something that is important to focus on, and given the fact that it is derived largely from human risk, an area that we should be thinking about. If we look at as an example, if we look at, this is a report that's published every year, the Verizon Data Breach Incident Report, and basically the top 3 out of the 5 vectors for attacks are human in nature. So phishing, certainly, which many of us may be familiar with, misdelivery, accidentally sending an email to, I thought I was sending it to Janice at Driasi. I ended up sending it to Janice at wallstreetjournal.com or somewhere else there, or misconfiguring. We create a cloud environment. We don't set the security settings right. We put data up in the cloud that everybody can see. So these things are cost millions of dollars a year, and need to be addressed. And actually, I was speaking a year or so ago with a chief information security officer at a Fortune 100 company, and he indicated that at the end of the day, all cybersecurity incidents begin with someone making a decision. That's a decision to obviously click on that fish or click on the email that is a fish. It's a decision to make that wire transfer without double checking that the individual was the one that you think that you're wiring the money to. It's making the decision to set up that cloud environment without putting in the necessary security protocols in place. And it ultimately could be an executive decision to not take the right and prudent actions with regards to cybersecurity that's needed to protect the organization here. These are all human-based decisions, and the risk is tied with us. Now, why us? And I think there's a number of reasons, actually. I'll just quickly kind of go through them. One is that we're creatures of habit and bias and subject to influence. And there's a whole number of, there's a science that's really grown up over the past 20, 30 years in behavior-based approaches that really speak to what are the biases that we have that on the plus side enable us to make decisions quickly and focus where we need to get through the day, but on the downside become opportunities for the bad guys to exploit here. So that's definitely an area of focus. And then, from a ecological standpoint, especially these days and through COVID, we're now largely disconnected, except online. So it's the working from home environment here where all we are working through and interacting with is through the prism of technology, which just creates a large attack surface, if nothing else. And I think, part of it, and this didn't exist. This has, arguably has existed always in a business context or maybe in other contexts as well. But there's a level of stress that we're always kind of dealing with, and so we have to make decisions fast. We have to focus in certain areas because time is money, and we need to get things done. And as a result of that, we unlock the door to the bad guys making out. And this is there's a company called Coveware, which on a quarterly basis produces a ransomware report. This is the most recent one from Q1 of this year. The ransomware demands have risen 75% over last year. We could talk a lot about what's driving that and what's occurred over the past few years. But we can see, the median ransomware payment is looks to be in the, just a little south of 200,000, with the average about 325,000 here. So these are, meaningful numbers here, and that doesn't include the costs relating to restoring systems and getting things back up and running here. What's also probably more of interest is the upper right-hand graph. This shows the way that the bad guys are getting in to attack us from a ransomware perspective. And as you can see over the years, there's really two main areas that they go through. One is phishing, and the other is what's called RDP compromise, remote desktop protocol. We won't geek out on that per se. Basically, it's just having an open window in your house through which the bad guys can get in, and some companies leave the windows open there. But email phishing is always neck and neck. In this particular quarter, it leads the pack here there. The other area is business email compromise. That's social engineering. The French film company who the CEO of the division and his CFO made the decision to wire $21 million to somebody that wasn't whom they thought they were wiring it to. These costs in the billions of dollars every year, and in fact, last year, according to the FBI, it cost organizations $2.7 billion. From a cyber insurance standpoint, arguably, ransomware and business email compromise are the biggest threats to an organization. And, the reason should be quite apparent, because there's money, right? It's the Willie Sutton line, why do you rob banks? Because that's where the money is. Well, why do you do ransomware, or why do you do business email compromise? It's because that's how you get money quickly. So this is an area that's continuing to grow, and it's leveraging, that impact is largely, if not all, the result of human actions here. There's 4 major areas of business email compromise. I'll just talk about them briefly. And these are typically, you see this through email type of phishing attacks. We'll also talk about down the road, there's some other ways that the bad guys are getting to us. But certainly the gift card scam, that's an email from someone purporting to be HR saying, hey, great job. Here's a gift card. please enter in your information to unlock it there, and they scam dollars that way. There's the M&A fraud that I talked about with regards to that French film company. Payroll diversion. Typically, there's an email from a highly paid individual to HR saying, "Hey, I've changed my bank account. In the future, send direct, my payroll direct to this bank account." Unfortunately, that wasn't the highly paid individual. And then supplier invoicing. That's where the bad guys get into your system. They find out who you're invoicing. They send notices out to those accounts saying, "We've changed our banking information. In the future, please send payments to such and such bank account there." So these are some key areas. And I'm just going to pause. Janice, you've seen real fish come through the help desk as they get reported. Are there any other flavors that you've seen that you think is worth mentioning?
The usual ones are looking for account information, or the trying to get user credentials and things of that nature. I'm drawing a blank if there were others.
Well, that's actually that's a great one. Getting credentials is probably the number one area that the bad guys are looking to do. Getting credentials enables them to ultimately, hopefully, from their side, gain access to the system to maybe deploy a ransomware variant, or to gain access to the email to do that supplier invoicing, or to take information that is IP, intellectual property, and use it for their advantage, or initiate a data breach there. So that's a key area, and most of the phishing is starting to go in that direction. So you're right. Also, I mentioned the disinformation with regards to Broadcom that occurred a few years ago. That is continuing to happen. We've certainly seen it in the political sphere through social media, but that is also happening at the business level. We've seen it probably more in public companies, where it's been in some part used from a hacktivist standpoint to generate, outrage against an activity that an organization may be doing, or it could be used, as in the case with Broadcom, to influence the stock price and perhaps take advantage of that there. Another area that I'll kind of key in on, especially with the rise of ChatGPT, AI, deep fakes. We probably started hearing them more again in the political context, where you had public individuals, videos of them appearing to be drunk or appearing to say something that maybe they didn't say. But now I think more and more it's beginning to show up in the form of voice recording. So with a 10-second listen of myself, as an example, an AI bot could be created to have conversations that sound like me, and so calls could be made, and someone from our organization may think it's me and take action one way or the other. So that I think we'll be seeing more of, and those deep fakes are also on the video front as well, which could create opportunities for the bad guys to take advantage of businesses. Insider threat has always been an area of concern, and that will continue to be as we go through, as well as fraudulent domains, which is, you're thinking you're going to a website to enter in your banking information, except that it's not the bank, or it's not that organization, and you're entering into a site that's solely there just to collect your credentials. So there's a number of key issues that kind of rise from this, and some of them are cybersecurity. Some of them are really governance, or the interaction between business and IT, and then some of them really deal with human behavior. With regards to the cybersecurity side, most of the breaches come from known vulnerabilities. There's very few that occur from what's called those zero-day vulnerabilities, or the 0-1 vulnerabilities. Most of these exist. There's typically mitigating actions organizations can take to address those. Unfortunately, not every organization does or does within the time frame that perhaps they should. Another thing is there's more emphasis should be placed on threat analysis and the vulnerability detection. I won't spend a lot of time on it in this presentation, but there are tools and there are ways and there are sources to really understand what new threats are out there, what that impact could be on our networks or our system configuration, security configurations. And there's also tools available to actually detect vulnerabilities up front and to highlight those areas that we should address and that we can build plans to address. And the average dwell time to detect a breach is too long. It's actually often identified not internally, but someone on the outside is shooting a note saying, "Hey, did you know that you're exposed over here?" Or "I'm seeing some data of yours in the dark web." There. So the average dwell time could be anywhere from 90 days to 180 days to longer in certain situations here. And another area is, and we see this a lot on the insurance side, is that there's an inverse relationship between the quality of the response and the cost of the incident. So if your response to an incident is fine-tuned, which means you have a good incident response plan, you've been testing it regularly, you're able to quickly address and mitigate not only whatever the origination of the incident was, but any fallout that occurs as a result of it, you have a better chance of minimizing your costs and minimizing any damage to your reputation there. And then when it comes to the alignment between business and IT, I often find there's kind of a semantic issue. The business people speak almost a different language than the IT people, and sometimes that becomes a joke, but it can become serious in terms of if that means that critical issues involving cybersecurity aren't addressed. And probably the main semantic variation is somewhat an outlook approach. Businesses are focused on overall strategy and risks. They're focused on how to be resilient and how to prepare, but all in the context of what their strategy is. The IT, especially IT secure from the cybersecurity standpoint, comes at risk through controls, through the concept of frameworks, which are in and of themselves very important, very helpful in establishing appropriate baselines. But it doesn't address the common question that the businesses may have, which is, what is the cost to me of doing or not doing what you're asking me to do here? And what is that impact to my business strategy? So there's always a need for IT to be able to quantify and qualify what it needs to do. And there needs to be an acknowledgement by business that cybersecurity is a key component of the strategy because they are in fact digital businesses and they need to address that risk in addition to the other risks that they address here. And so those are areas, that's a human, right? That's a human communication, that's human decision making, human interaction component that really goes a long way to determining how vulnerable an organization is beyond the tools and other cybersecurity approaches that can be done. And then last but certainly not least is the concept that human behavior is a key contributing factor to assessing, communicating, and mitigating cybersecurity risk. When we talk about employee behavior here, we typically focus on the security awareness program, and we're going to get to that in a moment. But it's also, human behavior exists obviously outside of it. It starts with it creates, if you will, the culture of the organization, and that culture of the organization, as it relates to risk, can help define, how risk adverse or not an individual is in anything that they do within the organization, including cybersecurity risk here. And I'm going to take a pause for a moment because, Janice, I want to kind of bring you back in here into the discussion, and I'd like you to kind of talk about how your organization, from a leadership standpoint, and as you have been thinking about it from a the employee standpoint with security awareness training, how the conversations around risk are between management and between within the departments, and what you've seen over the past few years, and also what are the beyond the human elements. We'll talk about kind of the other controls that you've added as well here. But let's just talk first of the kind of the human elements. How does your organization, how important is cybersecurity to Driasi, and how does your organization reflect that importance?
Well, it's very important to us. And we try to communicate with the employees, to let them know if let's say there's some sort of an email out there trending, or some sort of a scam that's, trending. We'll send an email out company-wide to say, hey, be on the lookout for this. This is from a bad actor. Be vigilant. Don't click on anything, and just kind of a heads up sort of a situation. And at times, even if there isn't a particular email, that's trending, it might be the time of year, like right before the holidays. A company-wide email will be sent out just to remind people this is a time of year where there's a lot of phishing attempts or spam going out that you need to be aware of.
Right.
Just to kind of bring it back to the forefront of everyone's mind occasionally.
Right, right, and that's a great point. It's really that communication from leadership, from the department managers, as well as from IT, that really helps to reinforce the importance of cybersecurity, and something that organizations should be doing as part of their efforts to mitigate the human risks here. With regards to the other controls, and obviously this presentation is primarily focused on the human elements of risk, but you've also done some other things to help mitigate the human risk and perhaps some other areas of cybersecurity risk. Can you just walk us through a few things that you've done over the past few years?
Sure. We've implemented mobile device management. And another thing that is part of our environment is email encryption
Right,
to secure the messages. We've also implemented data loss prevention, so that emails are and documents are scanned for bank account information or social security numbers, driver license numbers, things of that nature. Another thing we've done is multi-factor authentication.
right,
So we require two forms of authentication to connect to our network remotely, and also with the Microsoft Office products.
sure,
Yeah,
sure. That's and all those are key important things, and they're not, and I don't want to misspeak, but these aren't, you know, they're important, and they're not, they don't require uh, the bright new shiny tools often to be done, or expensive tools. They can often be done within the context of perhaps what you have, or maybe supplement with a few upgrades to your email platform, as an example, or to your single sign-on capability. Correct?
Yes.
There. And Driasi is also a SOC 2 Type 2 and PCI compliant there. And basically, for those of you who aren't aware, that those are basically certifications that they've taken certain steps in order to be secure, and certain steps that follow best practices, basically. So, and getting a certification is not an inexpensive process. That does cost money, and it does cost time as well. And it's not a one and done. You have to be certified annually in some situations. So that's a credit to the way that Driasi approaches its business. And it took that approach. We began working with Driasi 2.5 years ago on their security awareness program, and as a way to help make sure that the employees were focused appropriately on maintaining healthy digital habits. And the way that we approached it was not through, as I looked at the market at the time, the traditional ways of security awareness training, which is that we spend, 40, and I went through this myself at another organization where before the end of the year, you had to complete a 45-minute basically review with multiple choice questions and answers. And I, for one, I will admit it, I was one of those who kept getting those emails through the year saying, Doug, just to let you know, this needs to be done. And then the email font would get bigger and bigger, and then would turn bold. And then I would get, instead of having it come from IT, it would come from HR, and then it would come from the general counsel. And I said, okay, all right, I'll do it. And, on December 26th, I would go through the presentation and try to figure out a way where I could get through it, answer the questions with one hand while doing other work with, there. So those type of issues, while they're compliant, they're not really effective in changing behavior. And there's another sort of security awareness training that kind of plays gotcha. So we're going to try to put sneaky fish out there, and if you click on them, we're gonna slap you virtually, or put you in a penalty box, which means we're going to penalize you by having you take training. So we don't train you up front. We only train you if you're bad, which kind of, at least in my mind, puts a bad taste in someone's mouth with regards to training, and how attached are they really going to be with the impact of the learning if they have a bad taste in their mouth. So I wanted to approach it a different way, and that was through behaviors. And I happened to get together with a brilliant individual out of Stanford. His name is B.J. Fogg. He really is a pioneer in the effort of behavior analysis, behavior design, and what we did is we focused on the behavioral aspects of cybersecurity, and trying to figure out a way we could design for the right behaviors. And I'll just walk through quickly what his model is, and then talk about how we transition that into cybersecurity awareness. Basically, the Fogg behavior model is based on an equation. Behavior behavior change occurs when three things come together at the same moment: motivation, ability, and a prompt. And we can visualize this in a two-dimensional graph, with the vertical line representing motivation from high to low, and the horizontal line representing ability from easy to do on the right to hard to do on the left. And we can, if things are easy to do and my motivation is high enough, when prompted, I will do the behavior. And when things are a little bit harder to do, or my motivation is low or a combination of both, then when prompted, the behavior won't occur. And we can view the interaction or the relationship between motivation and ability in a line connecting the two that we call, or BJ calls, the action line. And anything, any combination of prompts that occur when I'm motivated and or have the ability to do the action above the action line occurs, then I will do it. And if it occurs below the line, in other words, the motivation requirement is too high for me or it's too hard for me to do, then that behavior won't occur at the prompt. There's two additional maxims that you need to think about when you're designing for behaviors. One is you need to help people do what they already want to do. If they're very resistant, it's very hard to get them to be motivated to leap over that resistance to do that. And the other maxim is you want to help people feel successful. They have to feel like they've done something and they've been and they receive some type of recognition of that here. So we'll talk about how we applied that in our behavior design for cybersecurity. The first thing is we wanted to, what is the aspiration? We wanted to create a program that has lasting changes for people's digital behavior. And then we did a brainstorming coming up with a number of things that we could do in order to achieve that. And the area that we focused on was designing for behavior that employees report all fish that they see. And the reason that we did that is because that was something that was measurable. That was something that we could see that we could create the ability to be low enough in order for people to be easy to do there as well. And it was something that we could reinforce it from a positive standpoint and provide recognition. And by putting it all together, the anchoring is behavior design involves an anchor, behavior, and then a celebration. The anchoring is what occurs right before I do the behavior, and that's the email in our situation. And then the behavior is I review it to see if it looks like a fish and report it if it is. And then the celebration is a recognition that comes back to me saying, congratulations, you did a great job on reporting that fish there. So these are the three elements that done consistently help support and help design and help create the environment where that behavior can become more habitual as we move forward. And we did as we were testing out our program, we worked with an organization of I think 700 individuals, and we went through the analysis, and you can kind of see the red is individuals that were caught by fish, and the green is the percentage of individuals that reported fish. And over time, the percentage of those that reported fish grew, and at the same time that was growing, you can see that those that the fish susceptibility, as we call it, or those that were caught, went down. In this example, it went down to 0 with only 2 weeks of our training and design experimentation here. And this proved to be the concept that we've instituted as part of our fish market training program, security awareness training program, that Driasi and other companies have been using over the past few years here. And I'll just pause on this. Janice, you've been working with us since we first launched the program with Driasi, and you've been great to work with, by the way. We really appreciate the efforts that you've done. I was wondering if you could kind of speak to, the impact that this has had, and the receptivity that it's had, and over the years.
When we go through the training and the simulated fish come in, we ask that everyone forward the suspect email to the help desk. And what I noticed was at first, people would forward it to us and they would question, is this a fish? Is this a phishing email? They weren't sure. And as the training goes on, you could see the confidence grow and build in the employees, because when they sent it and reported the email to the help desk, they weren't questioning it anymore. They would just state, "This is a fish." So that was great to see, because you knew that they were paying attention, they were going through the lessons, and it was a good feeling that we were heading in the right direction with this.
Right, right. That's great. That's great to hear. And a couple points just from a statistical standpoint. Driasi, when they started the fish susceptibility, in other words, the percentage of individuals that clicked on fish, was pretty good actually from an organizational standpoint. It was around a little over 2% after our first training. And we do something what's called black hat fishing, where we send fish out, we don't tell them that it's going out, and then this is the measurements I'm talking about. So it was a little over 2%, which is good. And over the past 2 to 3 quarters, that's dropped down to 0.4%, I believe, here. So not only are they confident in the fish that they are seeing and reporting on, it's also translating into positive behavior. And the result, positive behaviors is that they're not clicking on the fish as well. And Janice mentioned the lessons, which I haven't really talked that much about. We combine the phishing simulation with what we call micro lessons, and these are very short lessons put out over a daily basis over a month-long training period, and we call them there's snackable lessons. It's mostly there's information in them, certainly. We do keep track of scoring, and the companies keep track of scoring and participation, and the individuals are taking the lessons. But it's also a way to kind of prime the mental and behavioral pump, if you will, each day to say, okay, I need, here's something about cyber security, and therefore it's a little further in top of mind as I go through the day here. And we're designing that to be fun, engaging. We're always trying to refresh the material as well, and that combined with the phishing simulation translates into the results that we've been seeing and companies like Driasi have been seeing here. But this so that is largely the area of the security awareness and how do we train our employees. Well, risk doesn't exist in a vacuum. It doesn't. It's not bad employees clicking on fish that they shouldn't. It also is under the umbrella of culture, right? And culture is incorporating culture or governance behaviors relative to risk. And so we also need to think about our governance and how we're approaching it. And 79% of organizations rank cyber risk as among the top 5 concerns, but their confidence at the same time in being able to address it has gone down, or either addressing it or being resilient from it. So this is an issue that really needs to be addressed at the governance level. And again, for the sake of time, we won't do deep dives into this, but we're living now in a post-COVID world. It's arguably pre-recession world here. So we really need to focus our attentions in areas that are going to create value to us. And as we look at when we consult with organizations about governance, we really begin with the value-based risk mapping, really integrating the values and the strategies of the organization with the risks that are presented, so that we're really surfacing the risks that are critical to be mitigated or addressed in some fashion in order for that organization to execute its strategy. The other area is really looking at simplifying architecture, and that doesn't mean just kind of dumbing down the security controls that should be in place. It's really looking at the overall operational environment, what we can do to kind of streamline it, reduce the attack surface, if you will, and make it easier, increase the ability, going back to to our behavior design discussions of the individuals within the organization at whatever role to be able to execute on the cybersecurity. Doubling down on training, I think that's obviously critical here. If we're talking about that 3 out of the 5 threat actions come from human risk, be more agile relative to cash. Cybersecurity, like anything else in an organization, isn't free. We need to make sure that we're prudently spending and we have the ability to respond as the threat landscape changes and our needs, such cybersecurity solutions need to change. And then last and certainly not least is to engage in high bandwidth dialogue with the board. And that's between the IT, cybersecurity, and the board level to make sure that there is a high engagement there and a dialogue that's focused on values and that's responsive to the needs of the organization overall. And ways in which from our standpoint that we work with is really focusing on how do we design behaviors within the context of governance to actually create repeatable patterns of healthy dialogue and interaction in the areas relative to risk. So we look at what are the behaviors around value-based mappings that we want to make sure are repeatable and consistent within the organization. Obviously, the training we've spoken about here, and then what are the behaviors we want to see in terms of the high bandwidth dialogue with the board. So these are a number of issues that we want to talk to. And I think what's important certainly, and what we're driving towards, is that leadership and IT work together to align cybersecurity with the business objectives. That it's not just cybersecurity or IT coming up with cybersecurity objectives in a vacuum. Conversely, it's not the business deciding to move forward from a digital standpoint without taking into consideration the cybersecurity risk. There's got to be a way and an effective mechanism for those two entities to come together and focus on it here. And in one area in particular, and I'll just reference, is incident response. As I mentioned, there's inverse correlation between the quality of the incident response and the cost. And that's where the concept of practicing it, having a plan, is important. And certainly that, the leadership really needs to walk the talk, to communicate, to share tips learned, to pay attention to their IT team, to make sure that they have resources available to do what you're asking them to do here, or help them make the right choices, with the limited resources that they may have here. So and then certainly focusing on outcomes as opposed to just achievement. So what are the phish response rates? What's been the trend in phish response rates over time? What's our mean time in terms of remediating vulnerabilities that surface during our vulnerability analysis, our incident identifications that come through that pop through on that we're alerted to, and to the extent that there are incidents, what's the mean time and the cost to resolve them here. So from the governance behavior standpoint, what we really look to do is the behaviors that bring leadership and IT together, the behaviors relative to incident response, relative to communication broadly outside of the executive suite, and the behaviors that enable the organization to focus on the outcomes there. And at the end of the day, a good cybersecurity posture needs one thing, and it kind of reflects back to the beginning of our discussion, and that is it really needs you. It needs whether you're those of you who are watching this are in a leadership role, whether you're in an IT role, whether you're a staff member, it really is whatever it's incumbent on you relative to your role to really lean in on the discussions relative to cybersecurity, relative to the risks your organization faces, and relative to what trade-offs that you're prepared to make as a result of that for you to be successful. And there's basically 3 questions that I would ask that you think about as a result of this session. And I'm going to ask, and I'll ask Janice in a moment, additional questions that she might have. as well. But one is, how does cybersecurity drive your organization's growth objectives and stakeholders' needs? In other words, kind of flip the question around and say, how does having good controls in place, good cybersecurity in place, actually help drive value to us? And then, what behaviors do you want to see from your IT team, from your staff, from the leadership, from yourself? And then, how well are we doing at communicating the importance of cybersecurity and privacy to the entire organization, to our customers and other stakeholders there? So those are my three questions. Are there any, Janice, from your side, are there any additional questions that you could think of?
No, I do not have anything else.
Okay, great. Well, Janice, first of all, thank you so much. We really appreciate our partnership with you over the years and helping, at least from the standards point of security awareness, to keep your organization cyber secure. Kathleen, are there any questions from the audience?
We don't have any questions in the chat, but I have a few questions that I've got recently via email. If we have time for those, might be helpful.
Sure. Guess we have a
Okay.
few minutes, right?
Yeah. How often should training and phishing simulations occur? How many times a year?
Our answer is, phishing simulations should occur throughout the year, so that should be done on a monthly basis. The training cycles, we recommend quarterly. Other organizations look at bi-monthly, some do monthly, depending upon the need there. It really comes down to, in some respects, the organization. But I would say best practices would be at minimum quarterly basis, and then supported by monthly phishing simulations.
Awesome, thank you. And another question is, what do companies do with individuals who repeatedly click on the phish or violate security guidelines?
That's a good question. And Janice, I'm just going to ask if you could kind of speak to your own organization on what you've seen with regards to the habitual phish clickers.
Sure. We will start with asking the department manager to work with the person and, maybe get some more details from the person and see if they need additional training. And if we as the, an IT group can help and assist or, find or provide that training, we certainly will work with them on that. We don't really have a hard set of rules, for the habitual phish clickers, but I mean, yeah, we'll just, work on the training and see if we can get them to do a better job and not endanger and take risks, to the company by clicking on things that could be very dangerous and detrimental to us. So.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a fine line in terms of the what you do in those situations with those employees. I think the approach that you're taking is a prudent one in terms of paying more attention to them and kind of working with them. We try to work one-on-one with those individuals if they run through habitual through our program. And although some organizations take a much harder role and kind of bring them in through some type of disciplinary process, depending upon the nature of I guess the frequency of the incidents, the simulated susceptibility that they see there. So it varies, but I do think kind of paying attention, really focusing on helping the individual goes a lot more to encourage the positive behaviors than taking a more aggressive approach. Any other questions, Kathleen?
Yeah, thank you both. From a governance perspective, what are the best practices for commuting cybersecurity from leadership to employees?
Well, we talked about that a little bit earlier, but I think and this goes whether you're talking about cybersecurity or business strategies or communicating, the guidelines around working from home or coming in the office is, first of all, you can never communicate too much. So that's one. Number two, the you need to be able to communicate in a way that shows value to the organization as well as value to the individual. I know in our security awareness training, as an example, there have been stories we've seen that we've communicated to leadership where the individual has thanked us for the security awareness training that they received in the office because it saved them from doing something in their own personal environment, such as perhaps giving financial information to somebody that they did not do because of our training. And so being able to create the stories around why this is important in a way that the individuals understand. That's probably the most critical thing that I think leadership can do. And certainly, as I mentioned, walk the talk. It's not good if you're requiring everyone to have multi-factor authentication except for the CEO or the leadership team. That doesn't create the kind of the behaviors that will, for a healthy modeling approach.
Okay, awesome. That's all my questions.
Okay. Well, thank you, Kathleen. And again, thank you so much, Janice. Really appreciate your time today. I hope this has been helpful for those of you who've been listening to us, and we will record this and put this on our website and social media. So hopefully this will help you down the road as well. Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone.